So there is the topic we're going to be dealing with is, of course, what people in the popular imagination talk about the trolley dilemma, but it overlaps into a whole series of other areas of life that get into things like triage, and I'll define all of this in a moment. Triage and life-saving and priority when it comes to saving lives in any number of kinds of situations. All of these present ethical dilemmas. There was an English philosopher by the name of Philippa Foot. She was actually really American because she was the granddaughter of Grover Cleveland, who was the U.S. president, the only U.S. president to serve two terms non-consecutively. This has nothing to do with anything. I just want to make sure you get in your nightly trivia. Anyway, his granddaughter went off and married a British guy, and she became a philosopher in England. And she's credited with posing what's called the first trolley question way back in the year 1967. And from then, it's become a whole subgenre of philosophical, ethical probing and questioning with all kinds of variations, not just the trolley question, but the fat man trolley question and the tunnel question. I'll define all of these. Of course, with all due respect, Ms. Foot, that was her last name, the Jews have been talking about these things long before. The Chazon Ish, really, in a very focused way, wrote almost exactly about this issue several decades earlier. And as always, the Torah is the first to get there because the Torah is comprehensive. Hafachba v'hafachba d'chulaba. The Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos, turn it over. It's all in there, and certainly our question is in there. The trolley question, as it's posed, and there are variations on this, but let's go simple. Runaway train is heading down the tracks towards 5 people. If nothing happens, it will kill them, certainly. But a controller somewhere standing nearby has the option of changing the tracks and deferring it to a different track, in which case it will kill 1 person, certainly. What do? Do you do nothing and let it kill the 5 people? Do you do something and let it kill the 1 person? Implicit in the discussion are the questions: are 5 lives more valuable than 1 life? Not a simple question, not one that we won't have any absolute clarity about the answer when we review the basic halachic sources. And when and in addition, should you get involved? After all, if you do nothing, you will not be complicit in anything. On the other hand, if you do an act, is that considered a ma'aseh hariga? Is that considered an act of murder on some level? And let's even go back to something I just said that's not so straightforward either. Is indeed doing nothing? Well, we got a couple psukim that seem to belie that. More famously, the pasuk we read about it a few weeks ago in Parsha tells us in Parshas Kedoshim, Lo samod al dam re'echa, ani Hashem, not to stand idly by the blood of our friend. And Hashem underlines that. I'm Hashem, I'm watching, and I'm seeing that if you turn your eyes, avert your eyes when you could do something to save a life, particularly, or to help somebody save an injured person. So persons violating this lav d'oraisa, this negative precept in the Torah. So doing nothing is sometimes not an option. You have to do something. There's another pasuk. It's related, but it's counted as separate. It comes up in Dvarim, Perek Chav Beis. The pasuk is actually talking about a Shavas Aveda. It says, "Ve'im lo karov achicha elecha." Your friend doesn't have to be in the area, right? And you should gather the thing and bring it back to him. The end of the pasuk is what's ripe for darshaning. It says, "Vaya imcha ad rosh achicha." You'll keep that object until your brother looks out for it, right? He'll seek it. Vashevoso, and you should return it to him. And like other psukim that have a strange formulation, as Rashi says, they cry out darsheni. right? Explain me. So this one certainly must mean more than what it sounds like. Indeed, the Gemara in Sanhedrin, Darshans it at Sanhedrin, Ayin Gimel Amid Aleph, tells us that we're actually in the realm of Hasalas Nefashos, of life-saving, and that is Hashevis Gufo La'atzmo. There's another obligation when a person has the ability, we're supposed to save somebody's life and return his body to him in this formulation. So passivity is sometimes not an option either. So you got your trolley question, and then there are variations of this. I'm not really getting into the the philosophical speculation. I'd like to stick with the hardcore sources so in Chazal so that we come away with this. They're fascinating. There are plenty to keep us busy and stimulated. And that's, of course, our starting point. I'm just alerting you to the relevance of this and how in philosophy departments all over the academic world, these topics are discussed in depth. Ashrenu matov chalkeinu, that we have Torah, just pointing out the obvious. When you're sitting in one of those philosophy departments discussing these things, al smach ma, based on what? By which authority do you come down with an opinion? You're clever? You have a good creative idea? I mean, this is just one of many examples where we see that they're sort of bereft. They're sort of like out on a limb. They just come up with their own ideas. Nice, right? We don't hold by that with this or any topic under the sun. We understand that we have our Torah. The Torah is comprehensive. It gives us a way, a vehicle through which we can approach any topic. You'll forgive the metaphor. I realize a vehicle is probably not the right metaphor. We're talking about trolleys, but this is something. Thanks for the grin there, Ed. So this is something that is it has Torah sources to back them up. There are, and you can intuit this. There are a number of other overlapping issues. Triage is a fancy word that refers to a simple, unfortunate concept, but it comes up, let's say, predominantly in hospital emergency rooms, where you have a limited number of doctors, or alternately a limited number of life support systems, or incubators, as is the case these days with Corona. How do you figure out who should get them? That decision is called triage. 3 patients, which one gets treated first? What are the criteria by which you make such a obviously life and death, quite literally a life and death decision? It comes up not just in the emergency room, it comes up in the by medics, by first aid people who are the first to respond to car accidents. And you could extract multiple people from the car, and there's an urgency. Maybe the car's going to blow up. Who do you pull out first? Similar kind of a question. There was a question on 9/11 when they were already aware of what was going on. This was discussed already at that point. And the plane was barreling into towards the Pentagon in Washington. Should you shoot down the plane first? I mean, the thing is a moving missile. It's true, it's full of civilian passengers. They're going to die inevitably anyway. And perhaps by doing this, you'll save many other lives. How do you prioritize these questions? Lest we think that this is all academic and theoretical. Well, we just said it comes up in all of these cases. But the trolley question apparently came up in Los Angeles, my own hometown, June 20th, 2003. There was a runaway train. 31 freight cars from the Union Pacific were barreling towards Los Angeles. They actually made the decision. They were terrified that it might enter the Union Pacific yards in which were sitting there passenger trains and full of civilians and an impending disaster. And so they, on the spot, made a decision. They rerouted the runaway train, or the runaway train of 31 cars, Where'd it go? It went instead to a residential area in Commerce, California, not surprisingly, low-income area. And the train crashed through several houses. Baruch Hashem, nobody was killed. There was a pregnant woman who was asleep in one of the houses who was injured. She got away. She escaped through a window. There are all kinds of legends. There's urban legends of a drawbridge keeper who had this kind of fateful decision. He had to choose between a passenger train on the one side and his own 4-year-old son on the other side. Who do you save then? And once we're already talking about making such fateful decisions, this may be familiar to some of you. Anybody out there come with me to Poland? Not a one of you. Well, I mentioned this when we're going around Auschwitz. There was a posek of, and I also did this in my history class, the posek of Auschwitz, or one of the poskim of Auschwitz, Rav Meisels, received the following shaila from a father who was serving as a capo. The train had just come in, and selectia was imminent. They were about to decide who's going to go for labor and who's going to go for immediate murder, gassing. And the father saw that his son was on the list, his only surviving child. And he had the opportunity in his position to potentially save his son. In order to do so, he would have had to put another child in the son's place and send him to be gassed. He asked Rav Meisels, can I save my child at the expense of another boy? I'll leave this one till the very end, unless you know the answer, and then you know the answer, but we'll talk about this. So that's the setup. That's the introduction to the topic. Fascinating topic. Urgent and relevant. People have to know it. You never know. You may be that drawbridge guard. I found as I went through a lot of the primary sources. I looked them up. I listened to a few different shiurim. I read up a little bit on it. I found one of the problems of broaching this topic is it's messy. And I found very good, well, I'll tell you, I can cite my sources. I listened to a shiur on from Torah Anytime by a fine, very, very good speaker, young rabbi, very big Talmid Chacham. Let me quote my source properly. His name is, there it is. Right, Rav Moshe Walter of the Yeshiva of Greater Washington, if that means anything to anybody. With all these very fine shiurim, Rav David Lichtenstein has a chapter on this in his Headlines book, if that's a familiar book, full of these discussions. But I found it's very easy to get lost in the sources. There's so many spin-offs and so many side issues. I did my best. You'll tell me if I passed the test or not. I tried to clean up a little bit and try to put it in some kind of clear, methodical kind of a setup so that we could follow this from point to point. So let's start. Questions so far? We're good?
Yeah, I spoke about this question with my friends recently, and one of the things that we brought up was like also just to add to like what you're saying, like the age of the people. Like, what if like the 5 people?
Is age a factor? We'll talk about that. We'll get to that. What else?
Is age is like occupation if you're like a volunteer or if you're like a contributing member of society versus someone who's so and so. A lot of these different things come up, variables come up. Mm-hmm. That I just want to like that we spoke about.
I didn't bring it up tonight, but now that you're mentioning it, what about if they're Jewish versus a non-Jew? What about if they're Shomer Shabbos versus non-Shomer Shabbos? I may not go there. You might have to call me out. I don't have these. These are each pretty loaded questions that are in my other files. That some of us we broach these questions in other settings and other times. If anybody wants me to review those thoughts after we finish the primary sources on the trolley question, I'm happy to go to any of these places at the end. But let's start from the beginning. Let's start. I really gave an introduction. I talked about the importance of you can't stand by idly by the blood of your neighbor. You have an obligation to save somebody's life, derived from a pasuk. Really, one of the primary sources is the Mishnah in Trumos. It's in chapter 8, Mishnah 12. Rambam brings it down almost verbatim, lahalacha in Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah. Anybody wants the sources, I can send them. I'm not going to cite everyone right now audially because I imagine that's tedious for some people, but I have them all if anybody needs. Here's the Lashon. This is a small group and it's a high-level group, I'm assuming, in which case I'm going to read in Hebrew. I'll translate everything, but I'm assuming the Hebrew is meaningful to you. Meaning, I'm not just going to give you the English because that's you miss something when you don't have the Lashon HaKodesh. So here goes with the Hebrew, and I'll translate as we go. Here's the Mishnah, and again, the Rambam really almost verbatim. Noshim, she'amru lehem ovdei kochavim, group of women and a bunch of idol worshippers, which is the go-to term for non-Jews usually in Chazal. Group of women, and they're approached by a group of non-Jews with the following terrible dilemma. Tnu lanu achas miken, v'nitma osa, v'nitame osa, v'imlav nitame es kulchen. Give us one of your people, one of your women, that we may defile her. I don't have to define that, do I? Just checking. They're going to have their way with her. They're going to rape her. V'imlav, and if you don't give one of your numbers, then we'll just defile all of you. What's the Mishnah respond? This pretty famous Mishnah.
If they ask for her,
they say, "Give us one that we," and they're up front. They're all totally transparent. We're going to rape her, and if you don't give us one, we'll rape all of you. Is what those are their choices.
I heard a similar thing a couple of weeks ago when it was like in war. I think this is with the Jews actually, when they said like if you ask like specifically for one person, then you should give that one person. But if you don't ask like for their name specifically, then the whole group has to. Whatever.
Excellent. We're going to go there. This is where I found it gets all over the place and unruly in this class. So we're going to talk about when they specify. That's not this case. So we'll talk about Sheva ben Bichri, who's a very important player in our discussion, but that's another case. This one is simply, they don't identify which one. They leave it to the women to choose whoever you want. Give us one of your number, and either one of them or all of them. The Mishnah concludes what we would think intuitively. No surprises here. No trick endings. It says Yitam. It says Yitamu kulan va'al yimsru lehem nefesh achas miYisrael. Let them all become impure and don't deliver one soul from the Jews. Interesting lashon. It assumes that by giving a woman over for defilement of this nature, it's almost like giving up her life. On some level, it is. I mean, she comes back. She's alive. She's not the same person again. What's the logic? The logic seems to be that we're not allowed to do anything like this proactive. The minute and I alluded to this in the trolley issue, we'll see how it translates in that discussion. But the problem here is they're choosing somebody randomly and then pushing them into a terrible fate. We can't do that. That means we're culpable. We're doing something wrong if we're forced to do that. What Chazal say here, and we'll be using this expression, so get it down if it's unfamiliar, Shev v'al tasa adif. Sit and don't do, that's preferable. In other words, we go with the passive approach. After all, Kadosh Baruch Hu's got his ways are manifold, and there are lots of different possibilities. The cavalry can come riding in at the last minute and save everybody, but you don't do anything proactive. You let whatever happens happen, but you can't be complicit in this. The Mishnah goes on and gives a parallel but clearly different scenario. It says, if the same non-Jews were to say to them, Tnu lanu echad mikem v'nahargenu, give us one of your number that we may kill him. V'im lav naharog kulchem, and if not, we'll kill all of you. Yahargu kulam v'al yimsru lehem nefesh achas miYisrael. Same language, same basic bottom line. Let all of them die, let all of them be killed, but let them not give over one innocent nefesh from the Jews. I'm adding the word innocent. The Mishnah doesn't say that, but you'll hear why in a couple of minutes, why that's a relevant translation. We can't do anything proactive to cause somebody to die or be raped or one of these horrific crimes. You can't do anything. I mean, defend yourself if that's an option. If it's not an option, you would have to let everybody die. That's what the Mishnah says. Straightforward enough. And then we get to the factor that Eden introduced. And to do so, we have to go back and ready for a story, kids? I love stories. So this takes us back to the second book of Shmuel. When was the last time you all learned that? Second book of Shmuel. Anybody learn Tanakh? Nach? Comme si, comme ça? Okay, I'm sorry if that's an obnoxious question. Yeah, Nach stands for Nevi'im Ksuvim. It's used to be all Jews knew it by heart. Not so much these days. I guess maybe that's why you were vehement about wanting to learn Sefer Daniel. But okay, in this episode, David HaMelech has been betrayed, in this case by a Sheva ben Bichri, who's introduced as a blial, a worthless kind of a chap. And there's a whole long story with him, but he's morid b'malchus. He had rebelled against David's authority. What do you consider this? Here's the pasuk. Here's one pasuk about Sheva ben Bichri. It's a name that you should know. It's like there's certain things that come up that involve your Jewish proficiency. You got to know basic Judaism. I think Sheva ben Bichri's name is one basic idea. The ska b'shofar says about Sheva, he blew the shofar, vayomer, and he said, "Hey, lanu chelik b'David. You don't have any portion. Who's this David guy? I don't do that. He's not important to me. This is deep in the days of Avshalom's rebellion, and clearly he'd gone on to the dark side, to the other side. Well, as the situation would unravel, Sheva ben Bichri finds himself holed up in a little city called Avel ben Ma'acha. Yoav, David's famous and a ferocious general, comes to the city and demands that the city extradite Sheva ben Bichri. An Isha Chachama, she's not named, but she's called a wise woman, comes out, and she essentially understands that the Sheva ben Bichri should be delivered over to his death. The end of the story is Yoav walks away with Sheva's decapitated head. The people of the city took action into their own hand, decapitated Sheva ben Bichri, and gave the general his head. And that was the end of the story. Wait a minute. Anybody paying attention out there? Doesn't this story completely contradict what we just learned in the Mishnah in Truma?
No, because he wasn't innocent.
Right. Bingo. That was Ed's point. Right. Right. He was finally as having morid b'malchus, rebels the king. That is in the Torah, by the Torah's definition, a capital offense. You got to make sure you got a certifiable king. David HaMelech was, and since he rebelled and I'll wait. I see my audio is not good. Is it good now? Can you hear me? Can you hear? It's okay. Yeah. So he was not innocent, and since he was going to die anyway, if they had captured the city, people said either way, Sheva ben Bichri's days were numbered, and therefore it was a legitimate thing. From this, it's not the Mishnah in Trumos, but the Tosefta. We know the Tosefta comes after the Mishnah. It's a collection of brises, and it's the Tosefta that teaches an anonymous opinion, the Tanna Kama, essentially, a principle based on Sheva ben Bichri that's sort of an addendum to the first 2 points about not proactively delivering to rape and not proactively delivering a person to be killed, it says, repeating, say, now here's the lashon of the Tosefta, and it's not quite what you were saying yet. Pay attention, it's an important distinction. Im yichdu lehem kgon sheyichdu l'sheva ben bichri yitnu lehem va'al yargu kulan. If the person has been designated, has been singled out for whatever crime, let's say murder or rape, whatever it's going to be, they've already been pre-designated by the people, then you can deliver him over and not let everybody die. Because in this case, it seems the logic is he's going to be dying anyway. In fact, that's what Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai qualifies. He says, this is only on condition that he'd be dying memanavshach, no matter what you do. If, however, he would not inevitably die, even if he's singled out, they say, well, give us Sheva ben Bichri or we're going to kill everybody, but maybe they won't kill everybody, and it's not inevitable that he's going to die, then you're not allowed to do it. Then everybody would have to be killed. If it's a trade-off. I'm not going to bring in Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. He also enters the fray, but it's a further discussion that's beyond our particular focus, and you could look it up. Okay. Now comes in what's arguably one of the more central discussions, an argument between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish about our sugya. That actually is a big discussion in halacha, and we'll be referring to it in this discussion. Rabbi Yochanan, this is, by the way, this is brought in the Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud's discussion of the same Mishnah and Tosefta in Trumos, the Yerushalmi Trumos. We learn Rabbi Yochanan learns all of this discussion, what we would say kipshuto, like the simple level that you basically, you can give over somebody who's been designated. Give him to us, and we'll spare the rest of you. Because if you don't give him to us, we'll kill all of you. And that's essentially how Rabbi Yochanan understands this. Reish Lakish disagrees, and he says what you said, Eden. He says no, it's not enough that they designate the person. I mean, look, they can come along and designate any innocent guy who doesn't deserve to die. You can't give him over. It only is relevant, this whole leniency is only permitted because Sheva anyway is chayiv misa. He's a bad guy. He's not innocent. But Reish Lakish would say there's no stam heter, there's no blanket permission if the enemy specifies a person, even specifying the person by name. Consider then 9/11 and the airplane that's barreling into the Pentagon. Should they have shot it down? Well, if you consider Rabbi Yochanan, based on Rabbi Yochanan, Pashtus, you can and maybe should shoot down the plane. They're going to die anyway. I mean, there's a moving missile, so they're going to be dying, and they've been designated to die. Right? That's like it's a foregone conclusion. So all you're doing by shooting it down is saving all the other people in the Pentagon. Reish Lakish, not so clear. I mean, those people were the civilians on the plane. They're certainly innocent, and it's true they're going to die anyway. But you're taking proactive measures in your own hands. Not so straightforward. Although, hold that thought. We're going to see what the Chazon Ish might say about that when we get there. Okay, how do we paskin? And this is enough, Kamina. Pay attention. I realize this is. I hope you're following. I hope even more that you're having a chance to take some notes and get down some of these key ideas. Even if you don't save the notes, hearing a shiur like this, it helps so much to follow the basic key positions. Then you're able to refer to them back and forth. If you just hear it once, when I or anybody who's giving over such a shiur, you get it passively, say, oh, which one did Reish Lakish say? Which one is, who's who exactly? So, yeah. Hi, who's just joined us?
Rob, this is my friend. I put it in one of
Welcome.
my chats that were doing the trolley question, and
Very good.
yeah.
Welcome to our group. We started about 36 minutes ago, and we're well into it. So hopefully you'll pick up and try to follow. I'm trying to trace the major sources, which are fascinating, that will shed light on the discussion of how do you choose between lives. I'm reinforcing two major positions in the Yerushalmi, in the Gemara. Rabbi Yochanan says that you could, if you're not allowed, everybody agrees, you're not allowed, if somebody says, give us one person or we'll kill all of you, you can't do anything. However, if they say, give us this particular person and we'll kill him, or we'll kill everybody, including him, Rabbi Yochanan says you can give him over, you could hand him over. Reish Lakish says you can't. He's innocent. You're all going to die anyway. He's included. He's going to die too. Still, you can't do that by handing him over. It's a meiser ritzicha. It's like an act of murder.
Sorry.
However, Reish Lakish does agree if that person that they've designated himself is not innocent, he's chayiv misa, he's really somebody that should and could die anyway, then you can hand him over. Okay, that's what we've said so far. How do we paskin? How do the poskim bring this down? Oive, confusing. Here it comes. Now, Rambam does something very striking in the same section I quoted before in the Yesodei Torah. He paskins like Reish Lakish. He's very strict, in other words. He says you can only give over somebody on the condition that he's chayiv misa, he really deserves to die anyway, otherwise you can't. Now that's very striking, and many of the Rishonim and later poskim question the Rambam. As a general principle, when there's an argument between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, usually the halacha follows Rabbi Yochanan, not like Reish Lakish. So why is Rambam breaking from this principle? We know that there's several Rishonim who disagree with the Rambam. The Rash, the Ran, paskin like Rabbi Yochanan. The Beis Yosef, Rabbi Yosef Karo, paskins like Rabbi Yochanan. He brings this whole discussion. The Ramah, the great Rav Moshe Isserles, who's the Ashkenazi half of the Shulchan Aruch, he cites both views, which leaves us totally confused and unresolved. And that's why we need our later poskim. That's what happens sometimes in halacha. We're dancing around a pretty nuanced, ambiguous kind of an area here, or to figure out how this comes up. Okay, that's the basic background. I'll open for questions in a moment. It's the basic background to understanding how do you go about choosing in a very particular kind of a scenario where you're demanded to take action. Should you? Could you? Somebody was going to ask.
Well, I'm just curious because we brought down the Rush and the Rambam. Was the Torse or the Rush?
I don't know that it's not a topic that everybody weighs in on. These are the major views that the Beis Yosef quotes. Okay, but we know that this question, the trolley, the triage, has multiple manifestation, comes up in other areas, and so we gotta round out our picture and really have a sense of what Chazal say. I've got a very famous Gemara. It actually appears in several Gemaras. You can find, I'm going to quote the Gemara Pesachim, but you could find a similar discussion in Sanhedrin, in Ksubos, in Baba Metzia, and that's as follows. It's the discussion by Yahari Val Yabor, the three cardinal sins, and Chil Hashem, under what circumstances should a person die and not transgress, or conversely, should he transgress and not die? Not our discussion for tonight. But in that discussion, there's some discussion about why we're not permitted to murder. Somebody comes over, chas v'shalom. Well, here's the case. It says, is shvichus damim gufe minalan. How do we know that in the case of murder, that if somebody comes along and says, points chas v'shalom a gun to a person's head and say, kill him, and if you don't kill him, I'm going to kill you, the person's not allowed to do anything. Seemingly echoing what we said before in the Mishnah in Trumos. You can't take an active stance. You have to be passive. You can defend yourself. The guy who's putting a gun to your head himself is a rodef. He's a pursuer. He doesn't have any blood. He's not really a human being. You can kill him if you have the means. If you don't have the means, you can't proactively kill anybody. And here's how the Gemara expresses it: Svarahu. Unlike the other two cardinal sins, Avodah Zarah and Gilei Arayos, that we either have a verse or a derivation from a comparison, here it's simple logic. And the Gemara phrased it this way: Mare Durai Amar, Amarli. If the local governor were to say to me, Zil Katle Leflania, go and kill a certain person, V'ilo Katlina Loch, if not, I'll kill you. Amarle, what you should say to him, Liktiluch V'lo Tikto. Let him kill you and you don't kill, like we just said. Although the Aramaic sounds so much better than English, no? Gotta love the sound of the Aramaic here. Liktelucha v'lo tikto. Let him kill you and you can't do anything. My chazis. Now here's the phrase that everybody quotes, and you should have this in vocabulary. Why? What do you see? Why do you think you should kill him to save your own neck? No, my chazis. What do you see? The dama didach sumik tfei. Your blood is redder. Dilma dama dahahu gavra sumik tfei. Maybe the blood of that person is redder. Famous section of Chazal. Chazal is saying, we can't assess whose life is more valuable. Who are we? We're omniscient. We know in Hashem's eyes. It's a fascinating Gemara. I don't know if you're thinking about it, all the ramifications, but it's fascinating from the point of view of, if you look carefully at the words, apparently some people's blood is redder. It's just that we're not equipped to be able to make that call, make that decision. But if somehow we could, if we had criteria, we would, the criteria to say, oh yeah, somebody's blood, by whose blood is redder, that means whose life is more meaningful. So apparently such criterion exists. We're just not privy to them, and therefore we can't murder another person to save our own lives. Maybe that guy's more valuable than I am, or vice versa. We just don't know.
Why can't we make that judgment though?
Based on what would you make the decision?
Like for example, like if like you have a big like Talmid Chacham or a big Mizakei Arabim, I mean you can say that person has more of a role, and then Hashem does more than someone who does not.
Well, I was going to avoid the issue now. I might as well go into it though and get controversial. Why not? Non-Jews and non-Shomer Shabbos Jews, their blood isn't as red as Shomer Shabbos Jews, for example. But once you're in the realm of ksherim, which I think this is what this Gemara is talking about, somebody's a kosher, I don't think we have the knowledge and the criteria, the necessary information about people. Keep in mind that sometimes people do a good job of putting on a front of being big tzaddik, and sometimes we're shocked and horrified when we discover that they're not all along. And when you're talking about life and death kind of decisions like this, the Gemara says we're not equipped to make that decision.
But doesn't it say that like a Talmid Chacham, well, what's the word for someone who's?
I'm going to quote it. I'm getting there. So stay. I'm going to go there. I'm going to go in that direction. It's the Mishnah Horayos, major source. You can hear why this topic. It's a great topic. It's one of these vital. Got to know these sources. Got to know this basic discussion, and it's terribly important to do it methodically. I'm trying to. So we'll get there. Everything in its time. And then how does it come out l'halacha in these various kinds of cases? Another very famous source that's relevant in abortion, in discussions of abortion and other kinds of discussions, it's a Mishnah Oholos. The Mishnah describes a terrible scenario where a fetus, a mother is carrying a fetus, and the fetus is endangering her life. The fetus is a quasi-life. Abortion, if everything's equal, is prohibited. But in this case, not everything's equal. Hers is a full life. She's a living, breathing human being. The fetus is an ubar, is not yet a full life. And so the halacha is straightforward. They describe a person, they should extract the fetus. They should cut it open if necessary, cut it into pieces and extract it limb by limb. And the famous language of the Mishnah is as follows: her life takes precedence simply over its life. The Mishnah qualifies its statement. There's a famous line, and it's significant in halacha as well. Once the baby is mostly out, the later poskim define that as if its forehead has emerged in the process of childbirth. At that point, it becomes a full life. and the Mishnah says, Ein dolchin nefesh mipnei nefesh. There and here again, we don't waive one soul, one life in favor of the other life. They're both lives. We can't determine which one has redder blood, and therefore don't touch the fetus. Try to save them both if you can, but you can't sacrifice the fetus to save the mother.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
just real quick, they're allowing in some states now after birth of abortion in certain cases.
Mm-hmm.
In some states in the U.S. it just became allowed.
Wait, what do you mean? Wait, what do you mean you can't sacrifice the fetus to save the mother? Isn't that what you're supposed to do?
Again, pay attention to the distinction. It's the Mishnah's distinction. You're supposed to do it up until childbirth. But when the Mishnah qualifies, once the baby's essentially mostly born, which is defined when the forehead emerges, once the baby's mostly born, it becomes a life. In which case, you can't take its life to save the mother. It's as bad as taking one life to save another life. We can't determine whose blood is redder. You could only do it up until but not including the point that the fetus has emerged, because until then, it's not defined as having a full life.
So at that point, it's really up to Hashem at that point.
Right. We do our part. We do what's called the shtadlut. We make our effort. But if it comes down to a basic decision, we would save the mother in favor of the fetus, but once the fetus is born, they're both equally valid.
So rodef is before the fetus is born, pretty much.
The fetus is in the status of rodef up until it's born, correct. A rodef is a major idea. I should define it here, probably familiar to everybody. Rodef is a chaser, a pursuer. It applies in lots of scenarios. It applies to a guy who's chasing somebody else to murder him, or a person who's about to commit one of the arayos, one of the sexual prohibitions, and anybody who's endangering somebody else's life, or is going to cause somebody to worship idolatry. So that person, the Gemara says, Ein lo damim, has no blood. Kill him first. The Chazal say, Habala horgecha, somebody comes to kill you. Hashkim b'horgo, you can preempt him and kill him first. And when you do, that's not even called murder, because he's not a full life. So that's what rodef is, and it's certainly relevant to have these.
So side topic, if you like witness someone about to rape somebody, you're allowed to kill that person, the one that's trying to.
Not necessarily. I was more specific. Yeah, I really try to be very specific with my wording, to try to keep it in sync with the halacha. Not every rape would count as one of the arayot, one of the Torah prohibitions.
Really?
Some would, but not everyone.
Why? I guess that's. I want to change the topic for you. I guess my question.
Yeah, happy to do it. If you want to, you're welcome to join us. I'm giving Shiur. I'm happy to have bright students. We do random questions at the beginning and sometimes a little bit of time at the very end. So if you want to pick up that, I have a lot to say on that topic too.
No problem.
Let's not derail. We've already derailed the trolley. Let's not derail the whole.
No problem.
Our topic.
No problem.
Sorry. No problem. Okay, Yitzchak Chaim, you were saying that in the States they've already what have they done? They've legalized abortion. Is what you're saying?
In some states, after, and maybe some people in the chat can tell me the details, but after birth abortion.
After birth abortion?
I think we call that murder.
So in some states, if the baby.
Are you sure you want to back that up with some facts? It's hard to believe.
Like meaning,
you'll
for example,
you'll send us the reliable source for that one. I'm skeptical.
No, it's that, for example, like if a baby.
I'm intrigued.
No,
I know understand that America's going crazy these days, so everything's possible. But
in some, like it's that if the baby came out in a way that's not good, that's like. I don't know what the exact word is, but like
get the wording on this. This is one of those things you want to be precise on. This is how urban legends get started.
I hear you. Okay, okay.
Yeah. Okay. By the way, this discussion, these things come up, and there's a story that about a World War I. You don't hear so much about World War I such stories, but they happen too. A German officer raped a Jewish girl. She became pregnant. The German officer brought the girl to a doctor and told the doctor that he had to abort the baby, and the doctor refused. So the German officer took out a gun and threatened to kill the doctor if he didn't proceed with the abortion. That's shocking and relevant. The question comes up not just with fetuses. Is a fetus, does a fetus life come first or not? I mean, you have to. I should qualify this. We do try to the greatest ability that we can to save a fetus. If everything's equal, it's just not everything's equal. There's another category called a treifa. Treifa is somebody who's imminently going to die. They have a very temporary life that's right, and then soon they're going to expire. What do you do if it's a toss up between a treifa or somebody who's just a regular living person? So the Meiri has his view is that you could actually hand over a treifa if that's going to save the lives of others. And he has a big chiddush in light of the discussion in the Mishnah in Trumos, that he says even if he's unspecified, since he's not a full life, he's imminently going to be dying anyway. If you could hand him over and save a lot of other lives, not because of the number, but because he's not a full life, that would be permitted. That sounds like Rabbi Yochanan. It definitely does not sound like Reish Lakish. Although even Rabbi Yochanan, it may be pushing it even further because Rabbi Yochanan doesn't address a treifa.
That's a Gemara in Makos, though, right? If someone kills Barkatala, then they're not chayav mesa.
Right. Also true. Tachlis, we paskin like this Mishnah that one can kill a fetus to save a life. There's some discussion about that in the poskim. By the way, there's a difference between the fetus saving the life of the mother, which is the Mishnah, versus another case where the fetus might save the life of, for example, this doctor. And the note of Yehuda, Rav Yecheskel Landau of Prague in the 1700s, he actually wrote that no, if it's the fetus versus another person, not its mother, you can't give up the fetus or a treifa. Their lives, you can't sacrifice their lives to save another life. And go look that up there and see the reason for this. Now, in our sugya of whose blood is redder, Tosfos, Tosfos comes in the Gemara in Sanhedrin. We're going to be learning this next year. Tosfos has a different scenario that they introduced to broaden our topic. I have no idea why I had a Havamina. I had finished this tonight. I think we'll get through it by Sunday night. We'll have 2 sessions on this. But okay, richer topic than I anticipated. Okay, the Tosfos brings the following scenario. If the same governor, the Maradure, comes and says, you have to let me throw you onto a baby, and if you don't let me, I'm going to kill you. But by letting me throw you onto the baby, it's going to crush the baby to death. Tosfos says, you don't have to give your life for that. In this case, it's a new variation of this. Shev al tase adif, being passive is correct. Let him throw you onto the baby, killing the baby. You're not doing anything. There's no act. He's doing the act. You're just the missile. And you should not pointedly take sacrifice your life in favor of the baby, because of course Tosfos says, who says that the baby's blood is redder than your blood? You can't do anything, so just stay passive. There's a whole discussion. It's interesting. The Rav Chaim Brisker has a whole piece on this, famous piece that he writes about. If both people are equal, then clearly, how do you gauge? He has a whole discussion on this. I'm not going to summarize the Chidushei Rabbi Rav Chaim Brisker, but I will say that the Rambam does not concur with the Tosfos. The Rambam understands that all people are equal. He says shkulin hen, and so he says that you can't allow yourself to be passively used to kill somebody else. You'd have to, because they may be equal, you might have to die first. A variation on these themes. I'm just about variation on these themes. What if a person? We've been talking about other people handing the person over. What if the person knowingly volunteered his life in order to save others? would you be permitted to do that? Interesting variation on the theme, and there's a Gemara that addresses this too. Famous story in the Gemara in Tainis talks about two tzaddikim. The two tzaddikim are Lulinus and Papus, who are actually it's a whole long story that I'm really trying to discipline myself to not tell you the whole story. It's too good. They're alive right before the Bar Kokhba era. There's an indication that the Beis Hamikdash might be rebuilt. Hadrian, the new Caesar, promises as much. And there's a big stir messianically. And they start sponsoring people to go and rush to Yerushalayim. Well, at one point, the Caesar's daughter is killed and the Jews are being blamed. And these two tzaddikim, Lulinus and Papus, decide to give their lives. They confess to a crime that they are innocent of. They certainly didn't do it, but they did it in order to save the greater Jewish world. And by doing this, they prevented much bloodshed. The Gemara there says that they're standing in a very special place in Gan Eden, those two, by saving all those Jewish lives. Hey, wait. You can't do that. Papus Lulinus, who says that your blood is redder? What's the difference in this case? Why were they permitted to literally sacrifice themselves? Simple. They were going to die anyway. Meaning, if the whole Jewish community was selected out for destruction, and two of the members stepped forward on their own volition and said, "Hey, get us. We're the ones who caused this." That's permissible, since either way, Memanav Shach, they're going to die. They'll be taking the bullet, and they ultimately will take the bullet for everybody else. So that's. Say it again. It's Chaim.
But I thought we can't say, "I'll die anyways." Therefore, this. I thought we say, "Okay, it's really in Hashem's hands that moment they'll be killed." So it's like we can't say.
No, in this case, you can't do that when it's about choosing somebody else. To volunteer yourself when anyway you're going to be dying anyway, and by volunteering, all what you're really affecting is you're saving a bunch of other people. You could do that. That's what the Gemara concludes, and that's what the poskim bring down too. This becomes. I'm giving you, if you're keeping track of these sources, I'm basically giving you a working vocabulary in the most important sources in Chazal for all of this discussion. Because you start plowing through the many chuvas that are written, all of these are referred to, and there are nuances that distinguish them, and it's important to try to keep track of them. On Sunday, Bezras Hashem will lead off with this Mishnah in Horayos that we referred to earlier tonight, that does talk about actually different value of different people, different personalities, and under which circumstances you might save one over the other. And then I'm wind up mentioning how that virtually never comes up in practical halacha and why that's the case. And then we're going to be barreling down to what the inevitable famous Mishnah, the Machlokas Rabbi Akiva and Ben Patura, about if you're walking in a desert and there's only one canteen for the two of you and it's only enough to save one of you, what do? And finally we'll get around to the trolley and the modern poskim and the Chazon Ish and the Rav Moshe Feinstein and the Tzitz Eliezer and Bezras Hashem. Questions? Great. Okay. Anybody like to join in 15 minutes? I'm going to give a 20-minute long Gemara Shiur. Otherwise, I'll have a nice Shabbos, and I'll see you on Sunday.
Good Shabbos, Rabbi. Oh, Rabbi, are we still? Is the 9 o'clock or 4 o'clock Erev Shabbos thing still happening or no?
No. The guys. I mean, the truth is if there's a group and there's an interest, you know me. I'm game. They weren't so committed, and I didn't like the dynamic of they're doing me a favor. I'm happy to do it if there's a group that really wants it, like this. So if you want to propose it and there's a group, why don't you put it out in the chat and see if there's people who want to come to that kind of thing.
Okay.
That's a random question, Rabbi.
Yeah, and
so this is definitely part of a larger